Business news now, and for that I'm joined again by Stephen Carroll.
Hello. Jade.
We're going to start with some good news here in France for the French economy.
Yeah, that's right. France's central bank, the Banque de France, has revised upwards its growth forecast for the final 3 months of the year. Banque de France now says the French economy should grow by 0.5% in the last 3 months. That's up on a contraction of 0.1% in the previous 3 months, and that's also more than the government forecast that the economy will grow by this year, and it comes on top of a slight increase in confidence in France's industrial sector, while the services sector is said to be less optimistic about its long-term prospects.
How's that affected the markets then? Any positive signs?
Yeah, positive start anyway across in Europe to the trading week. Paris's CAC 40 opening up, as you can see, just over 0.3% there. Investors also digesting the news in Germany that German trade surplus fell in October, down about 2 billion euros. This on an increase in imports, important in this ongoing debate at how Germany's economy is dominating, particularly the Eurozone. Over in Asia, new figures showing that China's trade surplus was at a nearly 5-year high. Didn't help Chinese shares too much in trading. Shanghai Composite just barely in the green there. Over in Japan, meanwhile, the Japanese government revising down its growth figures for the last 3 months didn't manage to dampen much enthusiasm there. You can see the Nikkei up over 2.2%. Just a word on India too. Their Mumbai Stock Exchange hit a record high in the first hour of trading this morning.
Right, well, let's bring it back to Europe again. Labour ministers from around the continent are set to discuss a rather touchy subject, aren't they, about posted workers. What's this?
These are people who are employed by a company in one EU member state but actually work in a different country. Now, the European Union says there are 1.2 million of them across the 28 member states. The rules that are in place allow companies to pay their workers but not deduct necessarily the social security measures that are required in the country where they're actually working. This issue is at the top of the agenda of a meeting of Labour ministers in Brussels today. France, in particular, is lobbying for the rules to be changed, as Catherine Clifford now explains.
Most commonly found on French building sites, these workers come from within the European Union. They're hired from Eastern European countries like Poland and Romania, but work in France. The company employing them must pay them the country they're working in's minimum wage while respecting that country's working hours. But social security charges remain in line with the home state. So here in France, so-called posted workers must be paid the minimum wage of around 1,400 euros a month for a 35-hour week with 5 weeks annual holidays. But they don't have to pay French social security rates, which are the highest in Europe.
Social charges amount to around 40% of salaries, so labour costs are hugely reduced in the case of posted workers.
An employee paid €2,000 net, going by normal French rules, would cost the company €3,500, whereas in Poland they would only cost €2,800. More and more companies are taking advantage of this. There are currently around 220,000 posted workers in France, up 47% from 2011, and 1.2 million across the EU. The French government said there are also tens of thousands of non-declared workers in France, paid less than minimum wage and working illegal hours. Certain building sites were even described as using modern slavery in a recent report by French MPs.
Let's move on now with a look at some of the day's companies' news. And HSBC is said to be considering floating a stake in its UK banking operations on the stock market. Reports in the Financial Times say the plan's already been discussed with investors and the stake could be worth up to $32 billion. It would allow the bank to cope with new rules in Britain requiring lenders to ring-fence their retail banking operations. HSBC shares opened up about 0.7% in London.
US Airways and American Airlines are expected to finalise their merger later. It comes after the Supreme Court rejected an attempt to stop the deal at the weekend. The new airline group will become the world's largest carrier, though customers won't see any immediate changes.
And we're also expecting details of a restructuring plan at the defence and aerospace group EADS later. It's expected to include up to 6,000 job losses. French newspaper Le Figaro says the cuts will be made through voluntary redundancies and the non-replacement of retiring staff.
Right, finally, Stephen, some concerned citizens in the UK have been doing their bit for the country's debt mountain.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'd consider putting my money into my country's national debt, but public donations to the UK's government debt have reached £900,000 so far this tax year. So since April in the UK, over €1 million worth. That money just from 11 donors, amounts ranging from 78 pence to over £500,000. Now, according to the Guardian newspaper, most of the money was left to the state in people's wills, and it's the highest amount in 3 years. Just a drop in the ocean, though. The UK government debt is £1.2 trillion, or about 1.4 trillion euros. So it'll take a lot of very kind citizens to, I think, pay that off.
A few more donations needed then.
Needed badly, I'd say, yeah.
All right, Stephen Carroll, thanks very much for that wrap-up of the business news. It's time now to find out what's making headlines in the international